She arrived at the inn an hour after dark, and the first thing Ronan Fell noticed was that she was holding something against her chest the way a person holds a wound. She was tall, orc-tall, green-skinned, braids half undone by the road, and she stood in his doorway with the rain coming sideways off the Ashfin moor and her eyes doing the thing eyes do when they have been watchful for a very long time. Not frightened. Past frightened. Watchful the way old soldiers are watchful, and old mothers, and people who have been carrying something heavy for so long they have forgotten what it feels like to set it down. Room, she said. If you have one. Ronan had 3 empty rooms and a fire that had been burning for nobody. He stepped back from the door. Come in out of the rain, he said. She looked at him the way people look at a door they expect to find locked. Then she came inside. His name was Ronan Fell, 62 years old, widower of 9 years, innkeeper of the waypost at Callow Ford. The waypost sat at the junction of the Old King's Road and the Ashfin track, which meant it saw merchants, couriers, the occasional petty official, and, less often, travelers who were not any of those things. Ronan had learned early that the interesting guests were usually the last sort. He had also learned that interesting guests deserved the same thing everyone else deserved: a fire, a meal, and a door that locked from the inside. He gave her all 3 without ceremony. She sat at the table nearest the hearth and did not remove her cloak, and she set what she was holding on the table in front of her. A leather satchel, old and much repaired, the stitching at the corners done in at least 3 different threads. She rested both hands flat on it. Not clutching. Resting. The way you rest your hands on something after a long time of clutching. Ronan brought bread and the remnants of a stew that was better than it looked, and a cup of the barley tea he kept on the hob for weather like this. He set them down without making a production of it. He was going back to the bar when she said, quietly, "How much?" "In the morning," he said. "Eat first." He heard her exhale. Just once. Very controlled. He went back behind the bar and left her to it. It was almost an hour before she spoke again. Most of the inn was empty, 1 table of merchants in the far corner, deep in their own argument about river tariffs, and Ronan was working through an inventory he already knew by heart, giving her the privacy of his inattention. He had found, over the years, that people said more when they did not feel watched. "You're not going to ask," she said. Ronan looked up. She was watching him, both hands still on the satchel. "Ask what?" "What I'm carrying. Where I came from. Why I'm on the Ashfin Road in this weather." "I figure you'll tell me if it matters," he said, and went back to the inventory. A pause. "It matters," she said. "I just haven't decided yet if I'm going to tell anyone." Ronan set the ledger down. He came around the bar, not hurrying, and pulled out the chair across from her, not the chair closest, which would have been too forward, but the one at a respectful angle, the way you sit with a person who might need to look away mid-conversation. "I've got nowhere to be," he said. "And the fire's already paid for." She looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes were dark amber, the color of river water over flat stone, and they were measuring him in the way people measure things they have almost given up hoping to find. Then she told him. Her name was Veth Gron. She had been 17 years old when the king's court sent soldiers to the Gron settlement at the edge of the Coldfen Valley, not to parley, not to census, not for any of the official reasons that were given afterward. They came because the Gron clan's elder, her grandmother, had witnessed something. Had been present at something. Had, in fact, been asked by the old king himself, the one who died before his successor was confirmed, to hold something for safekeeping until a certain hour. That hour never came. The old king died 3 days early. His successor's men arrived at the Coldfen settlement within a fortnight. They were looking for the letter. The Gron clan scattered. Some fled north. Some were taken. Veth's grandmother pressed the satchel into Veth's hands the night before the soldiers arrived, with 3 instructions: run, don't stop, and never let anyone know what you carry until you find a soul worth trusting with the kingdom's business. She thought it would take a season, Veth said. Her voice was flat. Not bitter. Flat the way a very long road is flat, you can see a long way in either direction and none of it is particularly interesting anymore. It took 30 years. Ronan said nothing. He had learned that silence, in moments like this one, was not emptiness. It was a kind of room. I've been close, she said. Twice. A solicitor in the capital who seemed honest, and then his partner came in and I saw how they looked at each other when they looked at me. A retired judge in Callow Crossing who listened to 20 minutes of it and then told me to come back after he'd spoken to a friend of his. I didn't go back. She looked at her hands on the satchel. You learn to read the room. What's in it? Ronan said. If you want to say. Veth was quiet for a moment. A sealed testimony, she said. In the old king's hand. Witnessed by my grandmother and 2 court officials who are now dead. It names his legitimate heir, not the one who took the throne. The old king had a son by his first marriage, before the succession laws changed, and the boy was sent to an orc settlement in the Ashfin region to be raised out of reach of the court's politics. He's not a boy anymore. He would be 43 years old. He's been living in the Dunhollow settlement for 4 decades, and he doesn't know who he is. She paused. Neither does the kingdom. The fire shifted. One of the merchants in the far corner laughed at something. Outside, the rain came on harder against the shutters. Ronan sat with that for a moment. 30 years, he said, not as a question. 30 years. And you've kept it. All that time. Through all of that. He did not fill in what all of that meant. He did not need to. Veth looked at him. The Grand clan is gone, she said. My grandmother is gone. The 2 witnesses are gone. If I put this satchel down, there is no one left who knows it exists. The kingdom goes on under a man who took his throne by burying this letter. A pause. I haven't been able to put it down. No, Ronan said. I don't suppose you could. He believed her. He knew it was possible she was wrong, or deceived, or carrying 30 years of a grief that had grown into something else. He was an innkeeper, not a magistrate, not a scholar of succession law, not anyone with standing to say what was true and what wasn't in a kingdom's business. But he had sat across a great many tables from a great many people, and he had learned to hear the difference between a story and a weight. Veth Gron was not telling him a story. She was setting down a weight that had been on her back since she was 17 years old. There's a man in the capital, Ronan said carefully. Not a lawyer. Not court-connected. He was the old king's record archivist, retired now, teaches at the Frontier Academy in Ashrun. His name is Beldmaren. He was a young man in the old court. He's the only one I know of who had no part in the succession and has spent 30 years quietly saying so in writing. Ronan paused. I know him slightly. Stayed here twice. Told me once, over dinner, that the old court had done something it would answer for eventually, if the right evidence ever came to light. Veth was very still. I could write to him tonight, Ronan said. In my name. He'll come. He could be wrong, she said. About what he said. People say things over dinner. He could be, Ronan agreed. But I believed him then and I believe you now, and I'm running out of reasons not to try. He looked at her steadily. You've carried this alone for 30 years. You don't have to carry it alone for whatever comes next. Veth looked at the satchel. Then at him. I don't know you, she said. No, Ronan said. But you came in the door. He wrote the letter that night, after the merchants had gone to bed. 3 candles at the bar table. His handwriting was slow and careful, not elegant, but honest, the way he was honest, without ornamentation. He told Beldmaren that he had a guest at the Callow Ford waypost who was carrying something the archivist needed to see, and that he would stake his reputation and his establishment on the truth of it. He sealed it. He sent it with the morning courier at first light. Veth was at the window when he came back inside, watching the courier ride north on the King's Road. She still had both hands on the satchel. She had not let go of it in sleep either. He had heard her pacing in the room above his at 2 in the morning, back and forth, the measured tread of a person who had been waiting too long to rest easily now that the waiting might be ending. He'll take 3 days to arrive, Ronan said. The room is yours until then. No charge. I have coin, she said. Keep it. He went behind the bar and started the morning fire under the kettle. Breakfast in an hour. You can stay inside or you can walk the moor. The Ashfin track is decent in the morning if the rain's off. Either way, there's no one here who'll bother you. Veth turned from the window. She looked at him across the empty room. Why, she said. It was not a suspicious question. It was the question of a person who had been given so little kindness for so long that kindness now required an explanation. Ronan thought about it. My wife used to say there are two kinds of people, he said. People who close the door a little tighter when they see someone coming, and people who open it wider. She was the second kind. I've been trying to be the second kind since she died. He lifted a shoulder. You looked like someone who'd had too many closed doors. Veth was quiet for a long moment. Your wife sounds like she was a good woman, she said. She was, Ronan said. Best person I ever knew. He put the kettle on, and neither of them said anything more, and it was a comfortable silence, the kind that only forms between people who have, unexpectedly, understood each other. Beldmarin arrived on the afternoon of the third day. He was 70 years old and walked with a cane he clearly didn't need, and he sat down at the table Ronan set for him and looked at the satchel for a full minute before he touched it. Then he read. He read for a long time. Veth sat across from him and said nothing. Ronan stayed behind the bar. When Beldmarin finally set the pages down, his hands were not quite steady. I knew it existed, he said quietly. I never knew what had happened to it. Or to the Grand family. He looked at Veth. I am sorry. For what the court did. For all of it. Veth said nothing. But something in her face shifted, not softened, exactly, but released, the way a held breath releases. The man in Dunhollow, Beld said. Do you know his name? Esrin, she said. My grandmother wrote it down. She called him Esrin of the Ashfin settlement. He would have been 3 years old when he was sent there. He won't remember his family name. No, Beld said. He won't. He looked at the testimony again. But I will know it when I see it. He looked up. I'm going to Dunhollow. And then I'm going to the capital. This will take time, months, possibly more. Courts move slowly, and this court in particular will not move without being forced. He paused. But it will move. This, he laid his hand on the pages, careful, the way you lay your hand on something that has been a long time coming, is enough. He looked at Veth. You did something very hard, he said. For 30 years. For people you never met, for a man who doesn't know his own name. You could have stopped at any point. I know, Veth said. Why didn't you? She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at the satchel, old, much repaired, the stitching at the corners done in 3 different threads, the last of her grandmother's work still holding. Because she asked me not to, she said. The kingdom learned the truth 8 months later. A formal inquiry. A sealed royal testimony, 30 years preserved. A man in Dunhollow who remembered very little about his first 3 years but looked, an archivist quietly noted, extraordinarily like a painting hanging in the old king's private gallery. The histories would record it as an archival discovery. A procedural triumph of meticulous record-keeping. They would not record the innkeeper at Callow Ford who opened a door on a rainy night and put the kettle on and sat across a table from a woman who had been carrying something impossible for 30 years, and believed her. They would not record the conversation. But Veth Gron remembered it. She came back to the Callow Ford waypost the following spring, on a mild evening, no rain, the more gold in the late light, and she sat at the table nearest the hearth and put nothing on the table in front of her, because she wasn't carrying anything anymore, and Ronan Fell brought bread and the remnants of a stew that was better than it looked, and they talked for a long time about nothing in particular. She came back the spring after that, too. And the spring after that. And eventually Ronan stopped being surprised to see her, and started being surprised when he didn't.